Hello and welcome to another edition of the Webcomic Beacon here at webcomicbeacon.com, part of the Webcast Beacon Network at webcastbeacon.com, covering and promoting creativity and the creative process since 2007. I'm Fes, and this is another comic review. I've been doing these reviews for a while now, and you probably caught on that I heavily review presentation, especially for webcomics, because I believe it absolutely important and critical to present yourself well, or you're leaving money on the table and potentially readers are just passing you by. After all, if they can't make sense of your website, what hope do they have for your actual comic? Also, I'm fairly critical, but I try to get in some positives, or at least give some suggestions on how creators may be able to improve things. Well, today's review is going to be put through its paces for sure. This week's comic review is End of the Rainbow by Matt Cresswell and Thomas Vollans. You can find this at endoftherainbowcomic.co.uk. Be warned, I have several issues with this comic, but let me first start with the website design. The website is a background image that's supposed to represent some scuffed up and dirty paper or drywall, I'm guessing. So there's a mixture of textures to work with. There isn't really any sectioning off of anything, so that the header and the comic kind of float in the middle. The header is nice enough in theory, though. The basic layout isn't bad, though it does have a few hindrances. The header and the comic both have very thin lines, which doesn't automatically make it a bad thing, but all the lines are thin. With the textured background, this makes the lines feel more weak and less sharp. The lines just don't pop, meaning that the design doesn't pop. Even with extra shadows or hashing, it's really difficult for me to comfortably, visibly read this comic. Jumping ahead a bit here, but it's very related. The comic art has the same problem. There's no line weight variation with thin lines on a textured background. Plus, mostly with the earlier comics, the text is really, really small. Overall, I am having a really difficult time reading this comic. Now, let me step back. The menu bar has some narrow, stylish font that's got to be changed immediately. It's way too small and it all looks sucked to the left. Some of the menu options are incomplete or unavailable when you try to access them. Also, the omnibus for sale images are not clickable, making them kind of worthless, so these definitely need to be fixed. The homepage brings you to the latest comic, which is good. However, if you want to backtrack in the comic and read more, there's just no navigation here. You have to use the archive or back issues section, which isn't properly set up for book 2, which is what's currently on. I had to click through the end of book 1 to get to the beginning of book 2. I feel like the website's broken or just not well designed. The archives have navigation, so no worries there. Overall, this website design isn't all that fancy, but can easily be all that is needed. But there are several aspects that need fixing up. There are even a few broken navigational links I found while archiving. Alright, enough with the website, onto the art. Well, it's amateur for sure. Artistic inconsistencies are all over, and perspectives and proportions are frequently wrong. Though I can tell the artist has a fair handle on differentiating other characters in their design, so that's always a good thing, and sometimes can lead many novice webcomics kind of astray if they can't differentiate their characters. It all just needs more practice, of course. It feels like the art would benefit from more sketching as well as better planning for layout. Each comic feels crammed with text and lines, and it doesn't help that the comic frequently is lacking panel borders. Or if not panel borders, panels jump a fair amount around and you can lose track of the scene. And scenes are often not well established for where people are or making references to other places. So it's very confusing to follow. A few people that I've shown this comic to agree that there should be much more exercise in line weight variation. And one said that the text needs more breathing room. I know, I sound like I'm nagging and hating everything, but I'm critical and I nitpick. The comic is amateur, and there's still a ways for this comic to go artistically. With that in mind, I can appreciate what the artist is trying to do, but more often than not, it's not pulled off very well. Just keep at it, though. I think I did realize something important regarding the images, though. The comic images are all resized on the web. So the quality of the art is actually affected by a technical fault as well. Seeing the full-sized images in a new window, plus with the default white background, the comic images and lines and text look way better, much more easier to read. So yeah, the black lines are on a transparent background, so that's how you get the effect through, on the website where they have the background image is this paper effect. And in addition to either changing the size of the images on the website or uploading new, smaller sizes in which to match what the website is showing, I highly recommend having a white or tan background for the images and not this transparent with the textured image in the background. It may not be what you're going for, but what you're going for just isn't working. Unless, of course, one changes the viewing size of their browser window. But I know I'm not the only one having issues with the visual presentation of the comic pages. Back to the breathing room idea. I think the artist would definitely benefit from giving each comic page more breathing room, not just the text, but everything. That or practice more on sketching to really stretch those artistic muscles. Okay, on to the story. With the art not being very strong on reader retention, it has to be made up in the writing, right? I have to admit, with the visual issues, it was hard for me to continue reading past the first few pages. From what I can gather, the comic focuses on characters that run a bookstore and coffee shop. Also, characters that live in the apartments above the shops, I think? Not quite sure, but that's what it seems to be. The cast appears to be a slew of LGBTQ characters, and the comic is very character-oriented. Almost needless to say, a lot of the comic's content is LGBTQ-oriented. I admittedly have ADHD, and this comic could not keep my attention for more than a couple of pages before I started doing other things. It kind of took me a day to really read through the whole comic. This isn't a comic I wanted to keep reading for leisure, and I did read all of it for this review. Perhaps I just don't relate enough on the subject matter or the characters or any of their specific experiences. It's quite possible this comic would be better suited to other people that it may touch closer to. As I said, the comic's heavy on character-driven plot, or if I didn't already say it, I insinuated it. A huge cast of characters, even if the subject matter doesn't strike a mild interest, it's possible that there is a character that you'll like in this. I'd be interested to know how others feel about the writing and storylines of this comic. My biggest concern with the comic is the visual storytelling is just too loose, yet crammed for my taste. I'm gathering a lot of potential in the writing, perhaps not being well translated into a comic medium. With that being said, I still sense a lot of potential in the artist as well. So between the two of them, I encourage them to keep at it, but I strongly suggest to experiment outside of the comic updates. Flex those artistic muscles with more freedom than what confines the comic as you see. Run through some artistic and writing exercises, especially artistically. Do some thumbnails beforehand, or just let yourself go. Don't feel that you have to tell everything you need to say in one page. A lot of these could easily be broken up into 2-page spreads or can be constructed differently, because right now it's a little suffocating to read. It's very tight. Unless you're going for something in particular that I'm not quite getting, that's one thing. But I think you just need to keep at it. Both of you need to keep at it, and just keep pushing forward, saying what you want to say with your comic, and making it better. So once again, that was End of the Rainbow at endoftherainbowcomic.co.uk.